Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Seven Figure Journey podcast. I'm here with another special guest today. Before I introduce him, let me tell you that my name is Brett. I'm the host for today's episode, and I'm here with Rado Kotorov. He is a co-founder at Storied Data. Welcome to the show, Rado.
Thank you for having me, Brett. Glad to
Yeah,
be
we're
here.
excited to have you. I would love for you to tell us a little bit about the beginning of Story Data. You know that this podcast is focused on that seven-figure journey, but we want to acknowledge what happened before that. And we also want to know a little bit about you and your company. So please give us a little background about who you are and what your company is about.
I'm Rado Kotorov, co-founder and CEO of Story Data. I come with a very interdisciplinary background from having studied law and economics and fashion even, and then ultimately doing a PhD in game theory with a department in applied philosophy. So you can tell that I'm from a lawyer to an economist to a philosopher. And when you start doing businesses and etc., these kind of interdisciplinary experiences, they tend to have benefits. When I looked at contracts and stuff, especially when we have less resources than big companies to deal with things, the legal degree comes helpful. The design degree comes helpful into doing certain things. So you realize that life is more complex than just specialization. But I always say that you can't be a jack of all trades. You have to be a professional and a specialist in one area and then have a lot of varied experiences.
Well,
That's
you
about
may
me.
be, I have a lot of smart guests on my show. You might be the most well-educated guest that I've ever had. So, congratulations on all that study. I'm excited to hear how all of that background applies to the creation of story data and some of the lessons you've learned as you've led it.
So ultimately, game theory, where I did my PhD, is about decision making, different types of decision making, strategic situations, situations when you are making sole decisions and etc. under uncertainty, under lack of information, and etc. And I so happened to be to get right away interested into this, into data analysis for decision making and how people were using data so that you can overcome uncertainty or lack of information on other things. So I happened to work for a couple of 15 years in one of the biggest business intelligence and data management vendors, very close to the original founders, developing a lot of technology and paradigms for decision making using data primarily in the world. And I think that there are two reasons why we want to use data. We kind of finally recognize that we're biased in our decisions. We do a lot of wrong decisions. And kind of the data is the benchmark in how we do these decisions and correct for our own biases and prejudices and etc. So I was fascinated with that. And then as you get into the whole field, it becomes how do you present this data? It's not just the technicalities of how you extract it, collect it, and these things that are important too. But it is also how do you digest it for someone who wants to make decisions and in the right way. So that's how I got and how all of these things got to me. And so we naturally had to think, how do you visualize things? How do you develop the tools, the interfaces where the design started to play a lot of role? And you realize that actually, if you want to shorten the time of people processing information, everything plays a role, from the fonts you choose, the colors you choose, the graphs you choose, the arrangement of the information. We had a very big client that created 600-page report like a flip book so that the board of directors can go through this and just focus on the important information. And it saved them from 10 days of reading boring pages to actually being able in 4 hours to make the decisions. So that's my background, and that's how all of these things that I studied randomly, or because sometimes in life things happen in that way, came into play.
Yeah, I love that. Everybody listening can relate to the fact that we have to make decisions every day as business owners. And the more data we have at our disposal, the easier it is for us to feel a little more confident about those decisions we're making instead of just, I guess, giving into our biases and doing our best with our gut.
Or less certain about the decision we make. Somebody gave me the paradigm with retail. Say if you have more than 5 items on the shelf, people stop thinking, and very often they would abandon the purchase because they have the fear of regret. And
Oh
so is
yeah.
with so is with a lot of data. When you give people a lot of data, it can paralyze them. So it's very important how we give data, how we present them. And
Mm.
I'll tell you, the biggest confusion and honestly, the favorite example in my life is when people present lots of data in a PowerPoint and they put 70 pages of charts and graphs and tables. And then you go in it and they start clicking through the slides and they see something and then suddenly somebody says, we're on slide 110. Can you go back to slide 70? And then it starts going back. And psychologists actually explained to me and said, the biggest effect of this is that when you start changing the context and the visual and the slide, the brain is like hitting the reset button on the computer. And so it doesn't help in this case making the decision. It derails the presentation.
So you could actually be overwhelmed with the amount of data or the way that it's presented. Okay, so that's fascinating. Let's get to the part where you get this idea and you get it off the ground. Now you have a company called Story Data. You have a growing team with increasing revenue. What are some of the key lessons that you learned as a leader, Rado? I'm practicing your name, Rado. What
Yeah.
are some of the lessons you learned as you crossed into that seven-figure mark? Because the team starts to grow, you can't be just the expert anymore on the technology. You have to now become a capable business building CEO. So that sticks a lot of us in the seven-figure range. We get stuck in that lower seven figures because we don't know how to do the
Transition.
business building work. So what would be a key thing that you learned that might be helpful to others who are making that transition, who are trying to figure out how do I lead a growing team? How do I actually build a business?
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you, when you are early stage startup, you really are focused nothing to fall through the cracks because you have limited resources. I used to tell people the ball should never hit the ground. We're like a volleyball team. And my top priority is basically, and it's very difficult because you may build a habit out of that, is to watch for all the mistakes that can happen. So I'm like pretty much like a teacher in a primary school watching and looking at this is going to be a mistake, this is going to be a mistake. And at some point you start predicting the mistakes and they're natural to happen. And if you let that tendency overtake your management style, you become a micromanagement and you never can delegate anything. So from the very early stages, even though you are watching for mistakes, because of your experience or because you're learning as to have more exposure to the overall picture, that should never be the focus of you yourself correcting, helping. You should delegate this and let the people be in and feel in control of the situation and fixing and them watching for these mistakes and not you. And I think in my conversations with other entrepreneurs, this is really the number one problem we all face at the early stages. And it's the one that very few can detach from in the later stages. So I made it a point to fully delegate everything and not from the early days. And even though when I'm going to bite my tongue and say I could have corrected this, because some mistakes are painful and nobody intentionally wants to make them. Don't get me wrong, or they don't know. They're excellent professionals. I'm lucky with the team, but mistakes happen for many, many reasons. And like I said, biased decisions in some cases, changing circumstances, and we don't have as startups enough data. People go and say, give me the KPIs. A startup doesn't have KPIs. A startup has a goal, and we adjust every KPI and every action based on how close we get or how far away we are from it. But
Yeah.
that to me is the hardest lesson. And if you can delegate that, then I think founders should step to a more technical role and give the reins to someone else who can build an organization. Because at a later stage, it's all about the organization. It's not anymore about the technical skills or anything. And I also learned very early in my life, people told me you should always try to make yourself replaceable.
Mm.
And that's kind of another error that I see, and a temptation that you want to be the irreplaceable person in the company. But it's not a good feeling. Once you realize that you can be replaceable, then you approach things more calm.
Well, I think both those lessons are kind of two sides of the same coin, right? like
Mm.
that need we have. It feels good to be needed. It feels good to be smart. It feels good to be the one who has answers. But if we're not replaceable, then the business can only grow as far as our ability to keep our arms around everything. And that's not a good place to be in. And so I love that you talked about not being the person who goes around looking for all the mistakes. Because from that vantage point, you can't help but try to like keep the ball from hitting the ground at every turn. And when you're doing that, you get to that micromanagement stage and you just get stuck. So I love that call out. Any advice for people who are trying to overcome that? How do they overcome that natural desire to like, oh, I got to make sure nothing bad happens? How do they get to a place where they can be okay with some mistakes and other people owning it?
I don't know. That is a highly individual thing. I think there are people that who would never give up on that. I see managers, even in big companies, that made their whole career by pointing mistakes of other people. I think that was even the former CEO of IBM. She recognized that she was all the time pointing at mistakes, and she still made it in her career. So I can't, argue with success in this case. But I think personally, it is, in my opinion, the best way to do that is to ask yourself whether these people are more important to you or the mistakes are more important. The mistakes are painful, but your team is the most important aspect to you. And then you look from a different perspective and you say, I mean, we don't ban the kids from the house because they make mistakes, right? Similar is with this team. You have to some point say, that we could have done this better, what we learned out of it, but recognizing that you make mistakes. And also the other thing that helps is when you yourself tell the team the mistakes you make. I made a rule this for me that I'm the first one to, and at every meeting, to say, I made this mistake. And I actually do that every morning. I say, what mistakes did I make? And what should I avoid doing them in the future, if possible? But that brings a whole different aspect of culture in it when you do that, and the team is then very relaxed about certain things. And of course, we are always worried, well, if the team gets relaxed, aren't they going to make more mistakes? No, people are good. People actually, when they are trusted and they know it, because many people don't know. I had these situations that an employee would say, I would have never thought that you would trust me.
Mm.
And we do about 30 interns a year. And it's very interesting with the interns because when you go and tell them the first time, go and do that, they don't think that you're serious about that. They, they, they don't think that you trust them. So you have to actually tell them 3 or 4 times that I gave you this task because I do put my trust in you. They say, oh, you don't know what I do or what I know. No, I do. I interviewed you and I read the things you've done and I've seen your grades and I've seen your communication. So I'm pretty sure that what I gave you, you will do it 90% correct. And the rest of 10% in the review process will fix it. But
Yeah.
it's interesting to me that people don't believe that they're trusted by the management or their superiors in the organization. Um, and that's something that we have to help them understand.
We own that. Yeah. So I love it. Whether you're talking about 13 interns during the year or any number of new hires or even a seasoned leader that you bring into the team, to know that you trust them to go and do the thing, including the mistakes, and that it's okay. I really appreciated how you described the um, I guess the sharing that you make mistakes sometimes, that you lead out in that way to make it safe for others to go, oh, it's okay for us to make mistakes here, not because we're being sloppy, but because we're moving fast, we're doing our best, and sometimes mistakes happen.
Yeah, it's part of life.
Yeah, part of
And
life. Okay, so I love that you said I tell them when I make mistakes. I lead that way, and that backing up from that, that you gave them space to own something and not feel like you're going to be on top of it all the time.
and sometimes I'm the contributing factor for their mistakes because sometimes being rushed. I haven't stated things clearly. So you have to recognize when things happen to say, well, this is my contribution to this mistake.
Yeah.
And that's probably the part that I also make it sure, because I'm a big fan of the philosophy management by walking. But I also understand very well, and I've seen it in life, that as you walk, whatever you say can change the priorities of everyone else immediately. Because people think just because I said it, that is the most important thing out there. And sometimes I just throw ideas, and that's natural. And I tell people that if I want some priorities to change, they either would hear it from their manager, or because I want my manager to be coordinated in, or if I'm telling the manager, I'll be very specific. I'm changing the priority.
Mm.
But people don't even trust that. They think that sometimes whatever you say is the latest thing that has to be done immediately. And that's how I become the contributing factor in the mistakes.
Yeah, yeah, very good. Yeah, I love you. You're sharing a lot of wisdom here, Rado. I think we could listen to a lot of lessons for you for a long time. Okay, so two parts of this podcast. You just shared some really great lessons. Now we'll transition to growing pains that you're dealing with right now that I might be able to provide some perspective on that would be useful to you as our guest today, but also useful to others who are listening.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing, I'll talk on a macro level first, that we're confronting now is too much noise and hype in the economy. So we consider ourselves to be uh, a meat and potato type of business, because we're changing how documents are produced, the user experience, the generation, the automation, and etc., which is a big enough market because there are about 15 trillion documents worldwide a year when we take all the formats. But all the hype goes into AI and chats and things. And I'm personally an expert on AI, and on my team is we have 3 experts on AI that manage from computer vision to robotic surgery and etc. It's an interesting how this hype affects us, because the first question that we're asked is like, no, these documents won't exist. ChatGPT would replace everything. And it derails the conversation. And I tell people very simple things. We are not never going to replace the dashboard in the car with a ChatGPT, because it's going to take you longer to get the information through a conversation than through a dashboard or through other forms. And by the same token, we would never replace documents with conversational stuff, because we need them for many reasons. But this hype is driving the conversations in the wrong direction, and many people cannot focus on the essential things in their jobs. Years ago, the conversation was, how can I save money? How can I be more efficient at work? How can I produce better things? Now the conversation is, what's the latest technology that I can start playing with? And that makes it very difficult, and it extends the cycle and things forward. I think another thing that has changed in the States, which we share with a lot of entrepreneurs, are the preferred vendor contracts. I mean, to me, that has reached levels when it is distorting literally the market.
Mm.
And we've raised this question even on a political level. If you want to have an innovation, I want to compete on my product, not on that somebody else who doesn't have a product is a preferred vendor and says, you can use me to get into this account faster through me and pay me whatever amount of fee out of the revenue. That's not anymore kind of a market economy. And if we want to revitalize the entrepreneurial activities, we have to solve that problem.
Mm-hmm.
And the third factor that's affecting us, I think, after COVID, the attention span is literally very little. And I don't find we're discussing complex things, and I don't find that having superfluous Twitter-like conversations can help with the technology and those things. I also think there is kind of a belief that was instilled in people many years ago that everything should be so easy that you can try it and do it yourself right away. And I'll give you an example for that is I watch productivity going with these things, and the people that believe that everything should be just one click away. And I watch how they work in Excel versus people who develop deep expertise. The people who believe everything should be easy continue to do a lot of manual work. They never go deep layer into the technology. They do a lot of mistakes copying and pasting. The people who learn it and understand it deeply, they become incredibly productive. And so I think we kind of have to, yes, things have to be easy, but there are complex professional technologies and tools and things that people need to spend the time learning them. And even if we add ChatGPT to Excel, unless you know how this technology works, you won't ever be able to ask the right question what the technology to do for you. That's
Yeah,
the main problem down there that people don't understand. And so, yeah, we don't need to understand, like with the car engine, what's going on and how it is constructed. But there is certain level of knowledge that we need to acquire today, and a certain depth of conversations that we have to have, rather these superfluous kind of things. So these things, everyone is facing a problem with that because the world is getting more complex. The technologies we produce out there are even more complex. Yes, they are getting simpler and simpler to use, but you still need to understand what you can do with them. Otherwise, you're just clicking on a screen without producing anything meaningful or significant.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I think those are great challenges that you've brought up. For the purposes of our podcast today, I'm going to focus on the first one. The second one about the political environment of, you know, preferred contract kinds of situations. I'm not an expert in that. I can't really speak to that. The third one is fascinating to me, but again, is a little bit more technical in nature. It's not technical. The reality is, all of us have to know enough about what we're dealing with to be able to operate effectively. But I like to focus on the first one. The first one, I'm going to categorize it simply as there's so much noise out there that it's hard to get people's attention. It's hard to know where we should focus. And um, what I want to ask you is in your planning process as a leadership team for the growth of story data, do you feel like you have a rhythm and a cadence around cutting through the noise so that together as a team you have the clarity you need to move forward?
uh, we embarked on a strategy that we're educating the market because I believe that at some point, people would focus on the educational aspect when they trust you. And then they're going to devote the time and go back and read and say, why do I need to do that? And of course, we have two levels of education that are general market, general trends in the area in which we work, why it's beneficial to people, why it's cost effective, why it's professional, what it does to the users, to the user experience, to automation, and etc. So we do general something that I think every executive on any level can understand because I thought the best executives that I met, they understood technology on a conceptual level. There is nothing, we understand cars on a conceptual level. We don't understand them on an engineering level. So why should software be different?
Correct.
And to me, the biggest thing out there about AI is that we go and we present it as a magic, but AI is a quite conceptual, logical concept that if you understand it on a conceptual level, you understand its limitation, its benefits, and everything. The moment you start focusing only on the magical aspect, you're having the mechanical Turk that can pull any trick to you in any possible way. So we focused entirely, extremely focused on education from the team to understand everything in a simple conceptual ways to be able to explain it. I used to tell clients that unless they understand it 100%, we're selling snake oil. So I always say software is like the apples and oranges in the supermarket. You have to touch them, you have to see them, you have to make sure you understand them. Otherwise, you would never be able to manage it. And that's our thing. And we're seeing at the beginning there was a resistance. Why should I listen to this? Why should I read this? There's so much information that I can read. And then slowly and gently you do that. But I mean, we look at the presentation software, and I recently reread the history of the PowerPoint by the creator. And It's interesting with this generation that if I ask anybody who created PowerPoint, nobody knows. If you
Right.
ask nowadays, there is the star CEO. So, so I actually think the best products, they kind of don't attach themselves to names, but they faced the same problem 40 years ago. The education and people resisting. Why should I do that? And there were better products, more hype around that. And if you look at that, PowerPoint is the most successful software product in the world nowadays. So, and it kind of happened because it was useful. And it's actually, they stayed focused on it. We need to educate the people. We need to give them very good tools to do what they need to do to get the job done and to put them, the user, in control of their presentation flow and everything. So we subscribe to the same philosophy.
Yeah, very well said. Well, I think about something you said earlier in our interview. You said early on as a startup, the technical expertise of the founder or the founders is important. As you growing, as you're trying to scale, it's more of an organizational focus. That the technical piece is still important, but not by the founder, not by the founders. The founders have to figure out how to get other people in place to handle the technical, so that you can do more of the organizational. And I think there's a similar principle here involved with this challenge you brought up with the noise in the market, and for you guys to be clear about how you're going to go address that noise or compete in the presence of that noise. There's an organizational piece that has to be solved, and part of that is not only do we develop the competency to speak to that well in the marketplace, but maybe more importantly, how do we take the limited resources we have and carve out enough to run today's business while we carve out enough to go and be that trusted source of education in the market, right? There's resources involved to make that happen. And yeah, and so as a leader and as a leadership team, I think your team has an opportunity to, if that's a strategy for you, to be that trusted voice, that trusted source of education in a noisy market. How do we get clear about what has to happen this year in that regard, what has to happen this coming quarter in that regard, and how do we then align our resources, our scarce resources internally, to go do enough of that while we do our client acquisition and client fulfillment work, right? So there's like the core engine of client acquisition and fulfillment, and now we're trying to employ this additional strategy that moves us forward. And I think that's a challenge that a lot of businesses faces. I can see we need to go do this out in the marketplace, but I get so distracted with today's thing that we don't know how to carve out time, energy, attention towards anything meaningful and externally. Do you find that that's something that you guys wrestle with?
Yeah, I mean, it's first of all, if you embark when you're in a noisy environment with a lot of hype, you almost think I need more resources to create hype myself.
Yeah.
And it's a very difficult temptation to resist because, like, I'm most often asked the ridiculous question is, why can't you build $1 trillion company? And you're like, you know what? There is going to be a few $10 trillion companies, but the rest of the business and the economy is still going to be. It's good enough to have 100 million company. It's going to provide enough income for many people. A billion company provides even more. But let's not be fixated on turning every business and every activity in life into the Olympics game. And it's not a good thing. But so you have to resist this temptation very much about it, even though it seems like the easiest stuff and we all will go throw enough money and create hype. It's not going to happen. And so then you have to embark on your marketing strategy. And it's always a very difficult decision what to do. Marketing departments want to be entirely in control of everything and to be the marketing. But my opinion is that everyone is an educator in one way or another. And when you embark on an educational marketing, so to say, as a category, I want the voice of everyone to be heard out there and, the product managers to be able to say it in their own way, the marketers to say it in all the way. But what unites us is the product, the service that we provide. So there is nothing wrong about saying it in a different way. We kind of become obsessed brands to be so controlled, but we're not Louis Vuitton, we're not Chanel. We're actually giving people the tools to do things, to do their work, to present themselves, to present their content in a way. So in this environment, you can learn from anyone. I mean, I would used to tell them, if I have 100 designers telling different how they use the product, what's bad about it? It's great, because different people would align with different people. So that requires a different culture to create, which we're working on. I mean, don't get it, nothing is always finished, even though I have to put this caveat, because when I'm saying it, it might seem that we solved all the problems, but no.
No, yeah, you're working on it.
So the question is, we're teaching everyone, from including the interns. We have with the interns a program that says you need to produce some unique piece of analytical content, and then you need to templatize it so you can show other people how to do it, and you can do a video of it so you can demonstrate it. And they come back and say, why nobody teaches us at school? So my biggest challenge is that the sooner they finish with us, JP Morgan hires them.
Right. Yeah.
And it's like I'm like the training ground for JP Morgan.
Well, Rado, we don't have time to jump into that one. Although I will
It's good for
say
them.
one thing about it. I'll say one thing about it because I think it'll be helpful to others. If you feel like you've become the training ground for other businesses to steal your great people, then I think it ties back to the word that you said. We're working on our culture. When you get the right folks attached to a powerful purpose that they're excited about and they feel comfortable here because they share the same values, it's really hard for them to turn away from that and go chase, a higher dollar opportunity somewhere else. And we have to be competitive from a pay standpoint, but
Yeah.
the leadership, the culture is so influential in those decisions. Interns sometimes don't see that because they're brand new in their career. Sometimes they just chase the dollars. But most people recognize the value of a place where I'm passionate about what we do and I love the people or the values that we share. That's going to have a lot of staying power for the folks that you bring
I,
in.
don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that I actually must say that I'm fascinated by the interns, because they're all looking to a great work environment and meaning in what they do. And they're
That's right.
extremely, those that we can hire for one or another reason, all of them, there's many reasons why they pursue different careers and etc. But they're in constant contact with us, which is the biggest, and it's very rewarding. And, and they are spreading the word about us too.
Yeah,
And very often they go and say, we're not going to use the tools and stuff that you gave us because I can be 100 times faster doing
that's right.
it. So it's actually great. But I must say that as a generation, you hear a lot of complaints about it. But they're extremely value oriented, extremely meaning oriented. And that's where kind of brought our technology, what we do. They would come and tell you in some of the big organizations that 90% of the work they do is copy paste
Mm.
in various Excel templates and etc. And they say, we don't want this meaningless work. Yes, the money might be good and everything, but we want meaning. And so why not get them the tools that they don't have to do that? And that's exactly our mission. I want to eliminate the redundant, meaningless work, because they want to learn, they want to create real output, and they're very smart about that. We were not as smart as generation. I can tell you that I still see people for which I think copy and paste is therapeutic.
Yeah.
And they take it as a meditation. I mean, I go say, why would anybody want to sit 7 hours a day copy and paste? I had a friend of mine who took his son to his job, and the son said, Dad, I finally realized what you do. You copy paste all day. And he left the job as a general manager in a big consulting company. Said, I realized that I'm wasting my life in that.
Mm.
And I'm glad that actually this generation is raising this issue and putting it to management right there. Now, get me right, we didn't have other choice 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So that's a fact too. But the times have changed, the technology has changed, and it's good that the kids are aware of that.
Well, I want to thank you, Rado, for a very interesting interview. I want to try to bring a lot of what we talked about together in one idea, and then and we'll wrap up. But that idea is this: as we grow, we're trying to take a growing number of people and take targeted, coordinated action towards a shared objective. And there might be lots of noise out externally, and there's a lot of sometimes noise internally as we're growing. There's growing pains. But if we can, as leaders, if we can bring people together around common purpose or meaning, if we can share values, and then we can get clear about the distinction between working on today's machine that we've built and how we're coming together to build tomorrow's future. In this case, we talked about your desire to go and like a strategy to educate the market. There's a lot of noise. Well, let's become the trusted source of truth around these ideas. And how do we carve out precious time, energy, resources from today's machine to go make that future reality happen? That's something we all struggle with and wrestle with. So I would just say, get a clear meeting rhythm in place. Not just you, but our listeners. Get a clear meeting rhythm in place that helps us come together and work on and solve these problems in a way that allows us to deliver today's results while we're building tomorrow's future, even in chaotic, very noisy marketplaces that are filled with lots of hype around technology. We can get clear about what we will do in that environment and not try to match the hype, but just go out there and do our thing and do it consistently and do it well. And then you'll rise above all the other noise, because people will recognize story data is the place where we get the help that we actually need. So thank you very much, Rado, for being here today. If people want to connect with you on social or any other way, or they want to learn about story data, how would they do that?
Very easy. They can Google me and I come up right away, Rado Kotorov, or they can email me, rado.kotorov@storydata, or connect with me on LinkedIn. And
Very good.
we have a lot of content on our site. I regularly publish a blog on all these things on our site too. And I would welcome anyone to read it. And if they have any question, criticism, like it or not, they can tell us. And they should try the product too.
Yeah, very good. Rado, it's been a pleasure. You have a lot of wisdom to share. Appreciate what you've shared.
Thank you, Brett.
All right, that wraps up another episode of the Seven Figure Journey podcast. Please continue to listen to the episodes, review them, rate them, share them with others, so we can help as many seven-figure business owners as possible with these very real conversations, real people, real experience, real results. Thanks for listening. Come again next time.